Silence is not a sign of weakness. It's one of the most powerful statements a man can make without opening his mouth. When you choose to stay silent instead of chasing, explaining, or justifying yourself, you're sending a message that vibrates louder than any argument ever could. You're showing emotional control, self-respect, and maturity traits that most people rarely master. Corey Wayne often emphasizes that women are attracted to strength, certainty, and emotional composure. When you go silent, you're not avoiding the situation, you're standing in your power. You're saying, I value myself too much to fight for someone who's unsure about me. That quiet strength speaks to her subconscious. It makes her curious, it makes her wonder, and eventually it makes her feel your absence in a way that words never could. When you stop reacting, you remove her ability to control your emotions. Think about how most people behave when they feel rejected or ignored. They chase, they text, they call, they beg for closure. All that energy screams of insecurity and neediness, and it pushes the other person further away. But when you stay composed and silent, it completely shifts the dynamic. Suddenly, you're not the one seeking validation, she is. Silence turns the tables without manipulation because it's rooted in self-respect. You're no longer trying to convince her of your worth, you're letting your absence speak for it. That calm energy becomes magnetic because it shows that you don't rely on anyone else for your sense of peace. Corey Wayne's teachings revolve around emotional self-control and the power of masculine energy. Masculine energy doesn't chase, it attracts. It's calm, steady, and grounded, even when emotions are running high. Silence embodies that energy perfectly. When you stop over-communicating and instead allow time and distance to do the work, you're showing that you trust the process. You're not reacting out of fear, and that's what makes her start to feel uncertain. While she might have expected you to reach out or argue, your silence creates a vacuum. And nature hates a vacuum. That space makes her think, reflect, and wonder. Why isn't he calling? Did he stop caring? Is he moving on? That's when her emotions begin to shift, because suddenly she's the one feeling the loss. But silence isn't about manipulation. It's about self-mastery. It's about choosing peace over chaos. Most men struggle with the urge to fix things right away. They think that explaining their side or fighting for clarity will help, but often that just adds fuel to the fire. The truth is, people understand your value not when you explain it, but when they feel the difference between having you and not having you. Silence allows that realization to happen naturally. You can't force someone to see your worth through words. They have to experience your absence to understand it. The moment you stop arguing, stop defending yourself, and simply walk away with calm certainty, you reclaim your power. It's not easy to stay silent. It takes courage to resist the temptation to reach out, especially when emotions are involved. Your mind will try to convince you that saying something might fix everything. But what you're really doing when you stay silent is teaching yourself emotional discipline. You're learning that your peace of mind matters more than getting a temporary response. Every time you hold back from texting her, every time you resist the urge to explain yourself, you're reinforcing your strength. You're proving to yourself that you're capable of staying composed under pressure. That inner calm is what separates men who lead with confidence from those who act out of desperation. Silence also gives you the power to observe. When you're no longer reacting, you can actually see things clearly. You start to notice who truly values you and who only shows up when they can control you. The woman who once felt comfortable knowing you'd always reach out begins to feel uneasy. She senses the shift. Your silence breaks her pattern of control. It forces her to question her assumptions about your dependence on her attention. Corey Wayne calls this emotional leverage, not because it's a game, but because it shows that the one who controls his emotions controls the dynamic. When you're not swayed by rejection or fear, you become the stable center of gravity in the situation. She can feel that stability even from afar, and it draws her in. The longer you stay silent, the more you communicate through your actions. You're saying, I don't need to prove anything. My worth isn't up for debate. That's an incredibly powerful message. When a man stands in silence with confidence, he becomes a mystery. And mystery is one of the strongest forms of attraction. She begins to think about you when she's alone. She replays moments wondering if she made a mistake. Silence creates that mental loop because it denies her the emotional reassurance she once had. Instead of you seeking closure, she's now seeking it from you. That's the emotional shift Corey Wayne talks about when a woman starts to chase clarity, not because you demanded it, but because your silence made her feel it. But here's a deeper truth: silence isn't only about making her feel something, it's also about you realizing that your emotional state shouldn't depend on anyone else. When you go quiet, you start to reconnect with yourself. You rediscover what it feels like to have peace without chaos. You start to focus on your goals, your fitness, your purpose, your growth. Every day you remain silent, you build a stronger relationship with yourself. And that's the foundation of masculine energy self-reliance. You're no longer reacting to someone's actions, you're choosing your own path. That's when you start to attract not only her, but better opportunities in every area of life. The beauty of silence is that it communicates honesty. Words can be twisted, emotions can be manipulated, but silence is undeniable. It shows whether someone values you or not. If she truly cares, she'll feel the silence and come forward. If she doesn't, she'll fade away, and that's a blessing in disguise. Because now you're not wasting your energy on someone who doesn't reciprocate it. Silence reveals the truth without confrontation. It's the purest form of clarity. Corey Wayne always says you must be willing to lose her to get her. Silence is that willingness in action. It's the moment you stop trying to control outcomes and start trusting your value. You're saying, if she's meant to be in my life, she'll return on her own terms. If not, I'm still good. That calm detachment doesn't come from arrogance. It comes from self-assurance. You're not trying to punish her with silence. You're protecting your peace. And that's what makes you stand out in a world full of noise. Eventually, she will feel it. The longer you stay silent, the more that emotional gap grows. What once felt like comfort now feels like emptiness. She'll start to remember the way you made her feel, the safety of your presence, the certainty of your energy. And she'll realize that your silence wasn't cold, it was controlled. It was the voice of a man who knows his worth and refuses to beg for attention. That realization hits deep because it comes from contrast. Your absence makes her appreciate what she once took for granted. In the end, silence is your loudest response. It's the sound of maturity, of confidence, of strength. It's what separates men who know their value from those still searching for it. You don't need to shout your worth, you simply show it through your restraint. The man who masters silence becomes untouchable emotionally because he no longer reacts to the temporary actions of others. He lives by a code of self-respect and inner peace. So when you stay silent, you're not just making her feel it, you're reminding yourself of who you truly are. A man who doesn't need validation to know his power. A man who can walk away, stand tall, and let silence speak the truth that words never could. Emotional absence is one of the most powerful forces in human connection. When you step back and go silent, you trigger something deep inside the other person that words could never reach. Corey Wayne often explains that people value what they fear losing. And when you remove your presence, your voice, your energy, your attention, you create space for that realization to surface. It's not about playing games or using silence as punishment. It's about understanding that distance creates contrast. The absence of your presence forces her to feel what life is like without you in it, and that contrast hits harder than any speech, any text, or any plea for attention ever could. In relationships, people often take consistency for granted. When you were always available, always texting, calling, checking in, she got used to it. It became predictable. And in human psychology, predictability breeds comfort, but also complacency. She knew that no matter what she did, you'd always be there, waiting, reacting. That predictability removes tension, mystery, and excitement, which are the very elements that fuel attraction. But when you go silent, when your consistent energy suddenly disappears, it disrupts that pattern. Her mind starts to race, wondering what changed. She notices the void left behind by your absence, and that's when emotions start to awaken. The human mind is wired to crave what it no longer has. When someone's attention is freely available, it loses its perceived value. But once it's gone, it becomes precious. The absence of your contact doesn't just remove you from her daily routine, it removes a source of emotional comfort she didn't realize she depended on. That's why Corey Wayne teaches that when a woman pulls away, the worst thing a man can do is chase. Chasing removes her ability to feel the loss. It doesn't give her the emotional space needed to appreciate your presence. When you step back, however, the silence becomes a mirror that reflects her emotional truth. Without you reaching out, she starts to feel the weight of what she's lost, even if she doesn't admit it immediately. That's the secret behind emotional impact. It grows in your absence. When you stop trying to make her see your value, she begins to see it on her own. It might not happen overnight, but every day you stay silent, the memory of you becomes stronger. She starts to replay old conversations, revisit moments you shared, and compare the peace you gave her with the chaos she might be experiencing now. Your absence creates mental and emotional contrast. The world without your presence feels a little colder, a little emptier, and that emotional gap deepens the more you stay quiet. In Corey Wayne's philosophy, this isn't about manipulation, it's about alignment. You're aligning your energy with respect for yourself. When someone withdraws or stops investing, you match their energy instead of overcompensating. That's how you keep your emotional balance. You're saying, I'm not going to chase someone who's not meeting me halfway. That self-respect radiates power. She feels that energy shift on a subconscious level. The silence isn't just about no contact, it's about emotional detachment, the kind that makes her feel your presence more intensely than before. Silence also removes the pressure from the situation. When you're constantly reaching out, you're pushing her further away because your energy feels heavy, it demands a response. But silence replaces pressure with space, and space allows curiosity to grow. Curiosity is one of the strongest forces in attraction. When she can't predict your next move, her mind begins to engage. She starts wondering, is he thinking about me? Did he move on? Was I not as important as I thought? Those questions don't come from logic, they come from emotion. The more unanswered questions she has, the deeper your silence starts to echo, and that echo doesn't fade quickly. At first, she might feel relieved or indifferent when you go silent. She might even tell herself she doesn't care. But as days turn into weeks and weeks into months, that indifference starts to shift. She'll begin to feel a subtle void, a missing presence she can't quite replace. She'll notice that the attention she used to get from you doesn't come anymore. No morning texts, no check-ins, no validation. That's when the silence starts to hurt. Because what once felt ordinary now feels like a loss. And that loss creates emotional depth. You see, the longer you stay silent, the more you give her mind the freedom to fill in the blanks. And human imagination is powerful. It often paints a more romantic and emotional picture than reality ever did. She'll start remembering only the good times, the laughter, the comfort of your presence. The mind idealizes what it can't have. So the longer you stay silent, the more she begins to associate you with positive emotions and unresolved feelings. It's not because you're manipulating her, it's because emotional distance allows her to process what she couldn't feel while you were still available. At the same time, your silence helps you detach from the outcome. You begin to see that your peace isn't dependent on her responses. Instead of waiting by the phone, you start focusing on your goals, your growth, and your purpose. That shift in energy makes you more attractive, not just to her, but to everyone around you. Because a man grounded in his purpose, who doesn't need validation to feel worthy, emits confidence that can't be faked. Corey Wayne teaches that masculine energy is about being centered, calm, and mission-driven. Silence gives you the space to return to that center. It transforms the pain of separation into the fuel for self-improvement. As you grow more focused on yourself, your emotional energy changes. You stop radiating desperation and start radiating stability. And that's when she feels the difference the most. The version of you she remembers, the one who might have been overinvested or emotionally reactive, is gone. In your silence, she senses that transformation. Even without words, she can feel that your energy has shifted from need to self-assurance. That shift creates emotional polarity, the very thing that reignites attraction. The same silence that once confused her now intrigues her. She'll start testing the waters, maybe liking your post, sending a casual message, or trying to get your attention. And that's not by accident, it's because she feels the emotional distance and wants to close it. But your silence only has this power when it's genuine. If you're staying quiet just to get a reaction, she'll sense that too. True emotional absence is rooted in acceptance. It's the calm knowing that you've done your part, and now it's up to her. You're not punishing her, you're letting go. That authenticity gives your silence its strength. When you're not attached to the outcome, the energy behind your actions becomes pure. You're no longer sending signals of lack, you're radiating abundance. You're saying, I'm good either way. That's the energy that people respect and crave. Eventually, the emotional impact of your absence reaches its peak. She begins to realize that the peace and stability you brought into her life aren't easy to find. The attention she gets from others doesn't feel the same. The conversations lack depth, the energy feels forced, and that's when she starts to truly miss you, not just out of loneliness, but out of emotional recognition. She understands that your silence wasn't cold, it was clarity. It showed her what life feels like without the emotional safety of your presence. Emotional absence doesn't just create regret, it creates perspective. It allows her to see what words never could when you were around. She may have overlooked your consistency, your kindness, your stability, but in your silence, she feels those qualities more vividly. The moments she took for granted now stand out. The peace she once ignored becomes priceless. That's the silent transformation Corey Wayne often talks about, where your absence teaches her the lesson your words never could. And while she's processing that realization, you're evolving too. You've learned the power of restraint, the value of detachment, and the peace that comes from letting go. You no longer seek validation because your silence has taught you that true validation comes from within. You've become emotionally independent, a man who doesn't chase, who doesn't beg, who doesn't settle for less than mutual respect and effort. That's the kind of strength that women admire and crave at a deep, instinctive level. So, when you choose silence, remember that it's not about making her feel pain, it's about allowing both of you to grow through distance. It's giving her the space to reflect and yourself the time to rise. The longer you stay silent, the deeper she feels it, not because of manipulation, but because truth becomes clearer in your absence. She begins to feel the difference between noise and peace, between attention and presence, between a man who chases and a man who leads. Your silence becomes a language of strength, a statement of value. It tells her that you're no longer available to those who can't appreciate your energy. And in that quiet space, something shifts. She feels your absence not as emptiness, but as realization. The longer you stay silent, the louder your value echoes in her mind. That's when she begins to see what she lost. And that's the real power of emotional absence. It doesn't just make her miss you, it makes her respect you. Silence is not just the absence of sound, it's a teacher. When you stop speaking, stop explaining, and stop reaching out, silence begins to reveal truth. It's in the quiet moments that people start to see things they couldn't recognize before. When you go silent, she starts to hear her own thoughts more clearly, and you begin to understand yourself on a deeper level. Corey Wayne often talks about the importance of self-awareness and emotional control in relationships, and silence is the ultimate test of both. It forces reflection on her part and on yours, and it transforms how both people see the situation. Silence doesn't just create space, it creates clarity, and clarity is where growth begins. For her, silence is unsettling at first. When someone is used to you being present, always checking in, always responding, always showing concern, and suddenly you stop, it shocks her system. That consistent energy she once took for granted disappears, and now she's left alone with her thoughts. She begins to analyze her behavior and question her choices. Did I push him away? Was I too distant? Did he stop caring? Those thoughts begin to surface not because you said anything, but because you didn't. That's the paradox of silence. It speaks the loudest when you say nothing at all. It forces her to replay moments in her mind, searching for meaning, trying to understand where things changed. She starts to notice her own patterns and emotions that she ignored when things were comfortable. Silence is like a mirror. It reflects back what words often hide. When there's no distraction of conversation or argument, what's left is emotion. She starts to feel the impact of her actions. The absence of your attention creates a vacuum, and that emptiness pulls her inward. It forces her to face herself. Maybe she realizes that she took your consistency for granted, or maybe she recognizes that her ego made her push you away. Whatever the realization is, it comes from within her, not because you forced it, but because you allowed silence to do what words never could. People can deny words, but they can't escape what they feel in solitude. And in that solitude, truth becomes undeniable. But silence doesn't just teach her, it teaches you too. When you stop reacting, you gain control over your emotions. Most people act out of impulse when faced with rejection or uncertainty. They reach out for reassurance because silence feels uncomfortable. But that discomfort is exactly what builds strength. When you learn to sit with your emotions instead of escaping them, you begin to master yourself. You start to notice how much energy you used to waste trying to control outcomes or convince others to stay. In silence, you realize that peace comes from within, not from someone else's approval. Corey Wayne emphasizes the power of emotional self-control because it's the foundation of masculine energy. A man who can remain calm and centered even in silence is a man who commands respect. Silence helps you develop that composure. Every time you resist the urge to text or call or seek closure, you're strengthening your self-discipline. You're teaching yourself that not everything needs a reaction and not every emotion needs to be expressed immediately. That inner calm becomes your greatest asset. It makes you less reactive, more observant, and ultimately more powerful. While she's sitting in her thoughts, wondering why you're silent, you're sitting in your peace, building your strength. That's the difference between emotional dependence and emotional independence. She might be consumed by confusion, but you're channeling that same silence into reflection and growth. You're asking yourself deeper questions. What did I learn from this? What do I really want in a relationship? What kind of man do I want to be moving forward? Those questions lead you to growth, purpose, and wisdom. Silence gives you time to align with your values again. As you sit in that stillness, you also start to see the situation with clearer eyes. Emotions fade and logic returns. Maybe you realize she wasn't the right fit, or maybe you recognize where you could have shown more strength earlier. Either way, you come out wiser. Silence removes the emotional fog that constant communication creates. When you stop chasing answers, the answers come to you naturally. It's in those quiet moments that intuition speaks the loudest. For her, the silence continues to grow heavier over time. At first, she might feel empowered by your absence. She might even tell herself that she's fine without you. But as days go by and no message comes, the silence begins to sting. It's not just about missing your words, it's about missing your energy. She starts to remember how your presence made her feel secure, how your attention gave her validation, how your calm grounded her emotions. Without it, she's left to confront her own restlessness. Silence becomes her emotional teacher too. It shows her that connection isn't something to be taken lightly. Corey Wayne often says that space and time reveal everything. If someone truly values you, silence will make them come forward. If they don't, silence will show you that as well. It's a test that never fails. When you stay silent, you give both of you a chance to see the truth. You're not forcing her to miss you. You're giving her the opportunity to feel the reality of your absence. If she truly cares, that silence will awaken something inside her. If she doesn't, then you've already gained your answer without needing to chase it. Meanwhile, your silence helps you reconnect with your masculine essence. In a world that glorifies constant communication and instant gratification, choosing silence is a form of rebellion. It's saying, I don't need immediate answers. I trust myself enough to let time reveal the truth. That trust is magnetic. It shows emotional maturity, the kind of maturity that women respect deeply. When you're silent, you're not competing for attention or validation. You're standing in your power, observing and letting things unfold naturally. That's the essence of strength, calm, steady, and unbothered. Silence also filters out emotional noise. When you stop communicating, you begin to see who's willing to bridge the gap. You find out who reaches out when you stop reaching out. That's how you distinguish genuine interest from convenience. Many relationships exist only because one person keeps putting in effort. Silence exposes those imbalances. If she never checks in, never reaches out, never notices your absence, then her interest was conditional from the start. But if your silence triggers a genuine reaction, if she starts reflecting, missing, or reaching out, it's a sign that there's still emotional depth there. Silence reveals truth not through words, but through action, or the lack of it. During this time, you also grow more aware of your emotional triggers. Silence brings to light every insecurity, every fear, and every doubt. You start to notice your patterns, how often you want to break the silence just to feel in control again. But every time you resist that urge, you heal a little more. You're teaching yourself patience, emotional endurance, and the ability to stay calm even in uncertainty. These qualities don't just make you better in relationships, they make you stronger in every area of life. You become less reactive to stress, less attached to outcomes, and more focused on what you can control yourself. For her, silence starts to stir something deeper too. Once the noise fades, she's left alone with emotion, regret, confusion, curiosity. She may try to distract herself, but that quiet ache remains. The more she avoids it, the stronger it becomes. Eventually, she'll have to face it. And in that confrontation with herself, she'll either grow or retreat. If she grows, she'll come back differently with more humility, understanding, and appreciation. If she retreats, then she wasn't meant to stay, and your silence has saved you from chasing someone unready for your energy. Corey Wayne says, you attract what you are, not what you want. The man who can embrace silence becomes a magnet for peace, respect, and genuine connection. Because silence is rooted in self-respect. You're showing that your energy isn't free, it's earned. You're not afraid of losing her because you've already found yourself. That kind of emotional independence makes you unshakable. You no longer need her to feel complete. Instead, your completeness invites her to meet you at your level. Eventually, your silence will reach her heart in ways words never could. It will make her realize that your peace was rare, your patience was real, and your presence was powerful. She'll understand that while you could have chased, you chose peace instead. And that realization will hit deeply because it comes through her own reflection, not through your persuasion. That's the beauty of silence. It doesn't force awareness. It creates it. For you, silence becomes a lifelong skill. Once you master it, you stop reacting to emotional chaos and start responding with clarity. You learn to use silence not as a weapon, but as a boundary. You stop explaining yourself to those who aren't ready to listen. You stop giving energy to situations that don't serve your peace. And ironically, that very detachment attracts the kind of respect and love you wanted all along. Silence is the space where transformation happens. It's where confusion turns into understanding, where attachment turns into acceptance, and where loss turns into strength. For her, it might be the moment she finally sees your worth. For you, it's the moment you finally see your power. Both of you come out of it changed. Because silence doesn't leave anyone the same. It forces reflection, it exposes truth, and it teaches a lesson that presence is valuable only when it's appreciated. In the end, silence isn't emptiness, it's clarity. It's not about ignoring or punishing, it's about growing. It allows her to face her emotions and gives you the strength to rise above yours. It's the moment when both people stop talking and start feeling. And in that stillness, everything becomes clear who you are, what you deserve, and who's truly meant to stand beside you when the silence ends. Detachment is the highest form of strength a man can master, and silence is its purest expression. When you stop chasing, stop arguing, and stop trying to make someone see your value, you shift the entire dynamic. You stop playing the emotional game that most people fall into, and instead operate from a place of quiet confidence. Corey Wayne often says that the strongest negotiation position is being able to walk away and mean it, and that principle applies directly to relationships. When you detach emotionally and remain silent, you're not punishing her. You're showing her that your peace is non-negotiable. You're no longer dependent on her responses, her approval, or her affection to feel good about yourself. That emotional independence radiates power, and that's exactly what begins to draw her back. When you detach, you no longer need validation. You don't text to check if she still cares. You don't post to get her attention. You simply live your life. That energy is rare. In a world full of desperate communication, a man who can be still stands out. She can feel that energy shift. Suddenly, you're not chasing, and that lack of pursuit creates a void. That void forces her to confront a new reality, one where you are no longer orbiting her life. She feels the absence of your energy, your effort, your attention, and that's when she starts to wonder if she lost something valuable. Detachment makes you unpredictable, and unpredictability creates attraction. The moment she can no longer read you or rely on your attention, her mind begins to focus on you again. But detachment isn't indifference, it's maturity. It's not about ignoring her to make her feel bad. It's about releasing the need to control what she does or how she feels. You recognize that real connection can't be forced. If she truly values you, she'll come back on her own. If she doesn't, you're better off without her. That's the calm confidence. Corey Wayne teaches a mindset of abundance, not fear. You know your worth, and you trust that walking away from anything that disrupts your peace will always lead you to something better. When you detach, you give yourself room to breathe. You stop overthinking every interaction, stop waiting for her messages, and stop measuring your value through her attention. Instead, you start focusing on yourself again, your goals, your fitness, your purpose, your peace. That shift changes your energy completely. You begin to radiate focus and direction, and women can sense that from miles away. Masculine energy thrives on purpose. When you reconnect with your mission, you stop needing anyone to fill the gaps inside you. You become the source of your own fulfillment. That's what makes you magnetic. The longer you stay silent and focused on yourself, the more she feels your emotional independence. She begins to sense that she's no longer the center of your world, and ironically, that's when she starts wanting to be part of it again. Detachment also exposes truth. When you stop chasing, you see who's willing to meet you halfway. Silence removes the noise and reveals intention. If she truly cares, your absence will stir something in her. If she doesn't, she'll fade away. Either way, you win because you've stopped investing your energy in uncertainty. You're no longer begging for closure, you're letting life reveal what's real. That kind of peace is priceless. It's the point where you finally understand that you can't lose something that was never meant for you. Corey Wayne often talks about emotional self-reliance. It's the foundation of masculine strength. When you master detachment, you become emotionally self-reliant. You don't need reassurance to feel secure. You don't crumble when someone pulls away. You observe, stay grounded, and let things unfold naturally. That calmness is what earns respect. A man who doesn't react emotionally becomes a man she can rely on emotionally. Detachment turns chaos into composure. She starts to notice the difference. Where you once might have argued, explained, or tried to fix things, now you respond with silence and serenity. That calm unsettles her because it breaks her expectations. Most men react, they fight, beg, or chase, but you've evolved beyond that. You're no longer emotionally predictable, and that unpredictability commands attention. She starts to see you differently. Your silence and composure create curiosity, and curiosity leads to respect. She begins to think, he's not chasing me anymore. Did I lose him? Has he moved on? Those thoughts mark the beginning of a shift in her emotional state. Over time, your detachment creates emotional gravity. You become like the calm center of a storm, steady, strong, and unbothered. That energy pulls her back in without you lifting a finger. She feels your strength even through your absence. The man who once gave all his attention freely is now focused on himself, and that self-focus becomes attractive. Corey Wayne often emphasizes that women are drawn to men who have emotional control because it signals confidence and leadership. A man who can detach without bitterness shows that he's not ruled by emotion and he's guided by principle. Detachment also heals you from within. When you no longer attach your self-worth to someone else's validation, you become free. The weight of expectation lifts. You stop fearing rejection because rejection loses its power when you know your value. You start viewing silence as peace, not punishment. You stop needing to be understood and start prioritizing being aligned with your truth. That's when real transformation happens. You're no longer just practicing silence for her benefit, you're doing it for your own growth. Your energy becomes lighter, you're happier, more centered, and more focused on your personal evolution. You start to see relationships differently. You realize that love isn't about convincing someone to stay, it's about mutual respect, attraction, and effort. Detachment teaches you to appreciate connection without clinging to it. You can care deeply and still be willing to walk away if it costs your peace. That's emotional mastery, and it's one of the most attractive qualities any person can have. Eventually, your detachment starts to ripple through every area of your life. You become calmer at work, more focused on your goals, more selective about the people you allow into your circle. You stop reacting to every little thing and start responding only to what truly matters. That's the mindset of high value, quiet confidence grounded in purpose. And when she sees that version of you, it's hard to ignore. She feels the energy of a man who doesn't need her but could choose her, and that's what reignites attraction. The beauty of detachment is that it creates freedom for both of you. She gets the space to think, to miss, to reflect, and you get the space to grow. When she does come back, it's not because you chased her into submission, it's because she chose to return out of genuine desire and respect. And if she doesn't, you're fine because your happiness no longer depends on her. That's real power, the ability to stay calm and confident whether she stays or leaves. As time goes on, she'll begin to feel a difference between your silence and indifference. Indifference comes from bitterness, but your silence comes from peace. She'll recognize that you didn't walk away out of anger, you walked away out of strength. That kind of composure is unforgettable. It leaves a lasting impression because it's so rare. Most people act out of emotion, but you acted out of principle. And that principle, the commitment to your own peace, makes you stand out as a man of value. Corey Wayne teaches that attraction is about polarity. Masculine energy thrives in purpose, while feminine energy thrives in emotion. When you detach, you create that polarity again. You stop chasing, which allows her to feel and respond. Your emotional steadiness gives her the space to lean into her emotions without feeling controlled. In that space, respect grows. She starts to see you as someone who doesn't need her, but who could complement her. That difference between need and choice is everything. Over time, your silence becomes more powerful than any speech. She begins to understand what your detachment really meant. It wasn't arrogance, it was self-respect. It wasn't distance, it was discipline. You weren't running away, you were protecting your peace. Those realizations come slowly but deeply, and when they do, they hit hard. She'll remember how calm you were, how unbothered, how certain. That energy leaves a mark on her mind because it's something most people never experience, a man who is at peace with himself regardless of the outcome. As you continue to live with this mindset, you start to notice that the quality of your relationships improves. You attract people who respect your boundaries and match your effort. You no longer tolerate inconsistency because you've learned the value of silence and space. You understand that detachment isn't about withdrawing love, it's about maintaining balance. It's about knowing when to give and when to pull back. It's about loving from strength, not from fear. In the end, detachment doesn't kill attraction, it refines it. It separates the temporary from the timeless. The longer you stay silent, the more she feels your steadiness. The more you detach, the more she sees your worth. Because true respect doesn't come from words or arguments, it comes from energy. And when your energy says, I'm good with or without you, that's when people begin to value you the most. Detachment is not about coldness, it's about clarity. It's realizing that peace is more valuable than attention, that silence is louder than begging, and that walking away with dignity will always speak louder than staying out of fear. The power of detachment lies in its quiet strength, the strength to let go, to trust, and to know that whatever is meant for you will find its way back without force. That's the kind of strength that inspires respect, triggers reflection, and creates attraction that words could never achieve. So stay calm, stay grounded, stay silent when needed, not to prove anything, but because you already know who you are. The longer you stay detached, the deeper she feels it, not because you've withdrawn love, but because you've shown her what real love looks like. Love that starts with self-respect, grows through peace, and never begs to be seen.